They didn't knock. They didn't warn me. They came in the dark, and they took her. Not my wife. She's been gone 8 years. But the last piece of her I had left. The smell hit me first. Not the usual morning dew or the faint sweetness of petals warmed by sun. It was the smell of broken dirt, of something torn up, the kind of smell that follows grief around like a dog. I stepped onto the front lawn in my slippers, coffee still warm in my hand, and the breath left my lungs. The garden Joy and I planted together was gone, flattened, dug up, erased. Where there used to be 14 rose bushes, different kinds, different colors, all placed with care over 2 decades of shared life, there was now just raw earth and tire marks. The wooden plaque that read Joy's Garden lay in the mud, split clean down the middle like a broken spine. Taped to my mailbox was a letter, folded and sealed with HOA letterhead. I peeled it off with a shaking hand and read, "Non-compliant front yard landscaping, removed as per guidelines." 3 paragraphs of sterile language followed, something about preserving uniform aesthetics and failure to correct the violation after 2 written notices. They'd even itemized the cost of removal, $327.84, billed to my account. My hand tightened around the paper until it crumpled. I didn't even hear the birds that morning. The whole street felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I looked around. No one else's yard had been touched. Just mine. Back inside, I set the ruined plaque on the kitchen table, dirt crumbling onto the wood. The smell of soil lingered in the air like a ghost. I didn't eat breakfast, just sat there for a while, staring at what was left of her. At 11:42 a.m., the doorbell rang. I knew who it would be. Vanessa Carter stood on my porch like she was waiting to be photographed, clipboard in one hand, tablet in the other, HOA badge pinned neatly to her blazer. She smiled like I was a spreadsheet she had just balanced. "Mr. Dawson," she said, as if we hadn't met a dozen times in committee meetings, potlucks, board votes. "I just wanted to confirm you received the notice." "I received it," I said. She glanced over my shoulder toward the yard. "Good. We appreciate your cooperation." "I didn't cooperate." "Well," she said, brushing a speck of lint off her sleeve, "you're welcome to replant something compliant. Succulents are recommended, or turf, or nothing at all. Honestly, nothing is better." She turned to leave, then paused. Under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear, she muttered, "You can burn your roses for all I care, sir." And then she walked away. I didn't follow her, didn't shout, didn't break anything. I just stood there with my hand still on the doorknob, the silence swelling like a bruise. That night, I found the notebook Joy gave me on our 30th anniversary. Hardbound, still smelled faintly of lavender if you pressed your nose against the spine. She used to write poetry in it. When she passed, I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Until now. I opened to the first blank page and wrote, October 5th. They took the garden. Then underneath, what they took and what it meant. And I sat there letting the words hang in the quiet. I didn't know what I was planning yet, but something old in me, something I'd buried under routine and politeness, began to stir. Because the roses weren't just flowers. They were joy. And they made a mistake thinking they could bury her without me. Not this time. Joy used to say that every rose has a memory, not a meaning, a memory. That was her distinction. "Meanings are made up," she told me once, kneeling beside a blush pink hybrid she'd been coaxing back to life after a frost. "But memories, they're real. They grow with the roots." That's why she named them. Every bush. We didn't just plant roses. We planted birthdays, apologies, anniversaries, reconciliations. The yellow one by the porch was from the year I forgot our anniversary and spent 3 weeks trying to make it up to her. The deep red by the mailbox came the morning after her first biopsy. That one bloomed like it knew we needed something to hold on to. And the lavender one in the middle, the one she tended most, that was planted on our 25th wedding anniversary. She called it Silver Joy, said it reminded her of what love looks like when you stop trying to perfect it and just let it grow crooked. Now all of it was gone. I walked the edge of the dirt patch slowly, hands behind my back, like I was inspecting a crime scene. Tire tracks ran straight through the center. The soil was torn up in thick ridges where a backhoe must have yanked the roots free. Even the border stones we placed by hand were tossed aside like debris. There was nothing left to bury. That night, I went back to the notebook. What they took and what it meant. I made a list. Silver Joy, 1999-2023, 25th anniversary. Planted after Joy surprised me with plane tickets to Charleston and I forgot to pack socks. Gold Drop, from her sister's memorial, when Joy held my hand so tight I thought she might leave bruises. Sunflare, because she liked the name, and the petals looked like they were lit from the inside. Climbing Eden, the one that wrapped around the old trellis I built from reclaimed lumber. She said it made the yard look like a secret. The unnamed white rose, the last one she planted before the cancer took her strength. She couldn't dig anymore. I did the digging. She placed the roots in herself. That was the last time she gardened. I paused. My hand trembled slightly at the bottom of the page. Then I added, taken by force. That's what stung the most. It wasn't weather. It wasn't age or time. It wasn't neglect. It was removal. Intentional. Clean. Sanctioned. I walked the block that afternoon. Same houses I'd passed for 20 years. Different people now. Younger, polished, earbuds in, voices tight and efficient. Some gave me the polite head nod. A few smiled, maybe out of reflex. But no one said anything. Everyone had seen it. They had to have heard the machines. But not one person had knocked. Not one asked if I needed help. Or if I was okay. I passed a house 2 doors down. Artificial turf in the yard, edged with identical ceramic planters filled with something that looked like lavender but didn't move in the wind. The man who lived there, Jason or Jared, I think, waved absently as he watered them with a hose attached to an app-controlled spigot. Another house had a stone sign. Live, laugh, love, etched in granite. I wondered how much they paid for that. Probably more than I'd spent on fertilizer in a year. Everyone's front yard looked like it had been manufactured by the same architect. Boxes of symmetry, no stories, no past, just compliance. Back at my house, I stood in the dirt again. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of something distant. Smoke, maybe. Barbecue or brush fire. Hard to say. I knelt and pressed my palm into the earth where Silver Joy used to grow. It was still warm from the sun. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the kitchen with the notebook and stared out the window. The yard was a dark scar now, a gouge in the earth that looked like grief made visible. And I thought, this is what happens when memory doesn't fit the policy. Joy would have cried, not in a loud, dramatic way, quietly, the kind of crying where you feel it more than hear it. She would have picked up the plaque pieces, wiped the dirt off gently, and said something like, "They just don't understand." And she would have been right. But I'm not her. I don't have her softness. What I have is time, and the quiet patience of a man who knows the shape of things when they're being taken from him. That night, I began a second list in the notebook. Chapter 2, What Remains. And underneath, the plaque, broken. The soil, still warm. The roots, maybe some survived. The memory, every name, every planting. My hands, my name, my silence. For now. Because they think they just removed some plants. But they didn't just rip up a garden. They declared something. And I intend to answer. They showed up with backpacks, mismatched jackets, and arms full of Portland. Mira had half her hair dyed green again, and her headphones were still in when she hugged me. Kai was taller than I remembered. Last time I saw him, he was gangly and uncertain. Now he moved like he knew his limbs. Both of them smelled like airplane and rain, the kind that seeps into your clothes and stays. "Gramps," Mira said softly, pulling me in. Kai followed, his voice a little cracked but full of that unfiltered outrage he was always quick to hand out. What the hell happened to the garden? They hadn't even taken off their shoes yet. I didn't answer. I just gestured toward the front yard. Kai pushed past me and stormed out onto the porch, eyes scanning the scarred earth like he was expecting the roses to still be hiding somewhere. Mira stood next to me in the doorway. She didn't move. "Did they really?" She started but didn't finish. I nodded. Outside, Kai knelt and touched the dirt. He looked up at me, jaw clenched. "That was Joy's garden," he said, louder now. They knew. Everyone knew. I stepped outside and walked over to him, slow. "We don't shout," I told him. "We remember. And then we build something sharper than noise." His fists were still balled. "But you let them do it." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Kai. I let them think I did." That quieted him. He stood, brushed his hands off on his jeans, and followed me inside. Mira had already found the plaque pieces. She sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, lining them up like a puzzle. The way she touched the edges, carefully, respectfully, reminded me of Joy in the spring. Quiet hands, soft movements. "I want to do something," Mira said. "More than be angry." "I already started," I told them both. I handed them the notebook. Mira flipped to the list I'd titled "What They Took" and read slowly. Then she passed it to Kai, who scanned it like it was a blueprint for something explosive. "They have to be breaking rules," Mira said. "They are," I said, "but they're betting no one's old or stubborn enough to look." She smiled. "You're both." We spent the next 3 hours going through every HOA document I had in the drawer by the fridge. Mira sorted bylaws into piles. Kai searched the HOA website on his phone, flipping between tabs like he was cracking a safe. At one point, he stood up and said, "Who the hell writes in 6-point font and then expects you to follow it?" "Vanessa Carter," I said. He narrowed his eyes. "The dragon woman? That's her." Mira pulled out an envelope. "You kept the violation letters. All of them." She unfolded one. "Did you know she approved her own landscaping modifications 3 months ago?" I looked up. "She filed it under maintenance, but the HOA doc says that only applies to pre-existing structures. Her whole patio extension breaks code." Kai turned his phone toward us. "And this," he said, "is the Airbnb listing for her other property. She's hosting short-term stays in a residential zone. That's a code violation and technically fraud if she claims that property as her residence." I blinked. "You found that in an hour?" He smirked. "I'm a teenager. Give me Wi-Fi and moral motivation. I'll burn the internet down." "Don't burn it," I said. "Just draw a map." They stayed up that night long after I went to bed. I heard them typing, scribbling, whispering. There's something different about young minds. They don't assume failure. They haven't yet learned the shape of defeat. I lay in bed, hands folded over my chest, and stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling Joy and I painted together when we moved in. It was off-white now, but I could still see where her roller strokes had overlapped mine. I thought about how she'd laugh watching Mira and Kai tear through HOA regulations like wolves with legal pads. I thought about how she would have made tea and told them to slow down and focus on what mattered. And then I thought about Vanessa Carter's voice. "You can burn your roses for all I care, sir." I whispered the words to myself like a curse or a promise. At 2 a.m., Mira knocked gently on the doorframe. "We found something big," she said, "but we're going to need help." Kai leaned in behind her. "You trust the newspaper?" I raised an eyebrow. "Depends. Are you thinking classifieds or front page?" "Front page," Mira said. "It's time people saw what was done here." I sat up. "You sure you're ready for the noise?" "We've been too quiet too long," she said. "Let's give the roses back their voice." I nodded once, slow, deliberate, because this wasn't just about landscaping, not anymore. It was about memory, about legacy, about the right to grieve in full color, not grayscale compliance. And it was just the beginning. It started with a single photo. Mira took it the next morning, just after sunrise. She crouched low, caught the angle just right. Raw soil, the splintered plaque, the empty sky above. In the corner of the frame, a shadow of the mailbox leaned like a mourner. Then she sat at the kitchen table, pushed my notebook aside, and started typing. Her fingers moved fast but careful, like she was stitching words instead of writing them. Kai paced the room behind her, muttering thoughts out loud, occasionally stopping to look over her shoulder and say, "No, don't say it like that. Say it like he would." She was writing for me. At first, I hated the idea. I've never liked putting my voice into someone else's mouth. But Mira didn't mouth anything. She listened, really listened, asked questions, took notes, read back sentences, and then erased them when they didn't ring true. By noon, it was done. The title was simple: "The Garden That Was Taken." The article read like memory, not vengeance, not noise. It told the story of Joy's roses, how we planted them on our 25th anniversary, how we added one each spring, how the garden wasn't just flowers, but grief tended into beauty. It didn't mention Vanessa by name. It didn't need to. The photo said more than any accusation could. Mira emailed it to the Brookside Chronicle under my name, with a short note. "Submitted for Local Voices" column. We didn't expect it to run that fast, but by the next morning, it was there. Page 2, full column, my name in bold at the top. And that photo, the one with the dirt and the plaque and the shadow, took up half the page. At 7:14 a.m., my neighbor Gail from across the street walked over with a copy of the paper in her hand. She didn't say much, just held it out and whispered, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Henry." At 9:02, I got a knock on the door. Mr. Lynn from 2 blocks over. He looked like he wanted to say something profound, but settled for a slow nod and a quiet, "They had no right." By noon, 7 people had stopped by. Most didn't stay long. Some just left folded notes or flowers on the porch. The notes all began the same way. "I didn't know. I should have said something. I saw them removing it. I thought you'd given permission." It was guilt in ink. Vanessa didn't say a word. Not to me. Not yet. But I saw her. She passed my house twice that day, once jogging, once in her car. She didn't wave, didn't stop. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes flicked toward the yard and then away like it burned her to look at it. The crack had started. That evening I sat on the porch with Kai and Mira. A light breeze kicked up from the east. You could smell wet concrete and grass clippings from someone's mower. Kai scrolled through his phone. You're being shared all over the HOA group chats, he said, and I found 2 Facebook groups already reposted the article. One lady called it the most heartbreakingly polite takedown of a tyrant I've ever read. Mira grinned. We didn't name her. We didn't have to. I watched the sky change color. The thing about revenge, real revenge, is that it doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it comes like rot, quietly spreading. The kind people don't notice until the structure starts to groan. That night, the HOA inbox started to fill. One of the board members, Jim, a retired accountant who always smelled faintly of garlic, called me around 8:30. Henry, he said, voice low, what the hell happened? I told the truth, I replied. He sighed. Vanessa says you approved the removal, signed the violation notice. I signed nothing, I said. I have the originals, dated, unmarked. Come see them yourself. There was a pause. I believe you, he said, but she's not going to like this attention. Neither did the roses. Click. I set the phone down gently. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel like before. It wasn't loneliness. It was momentum. At 10:47, Mira slipped another envelope across the table. She filed 3 more violations this week, she said. 2 of them are flimsy. But the third? She pulled out a copy of a landscaping permit, stamped emergency approval. She claimed the roses obstructed visibility from the sidewalk, cited safety risk, claimed someone tripped. Anyone actually trip? I asked. Mira raised an eyebrow. You've had the same yard for 20 years. If someone tripped, I think we'd know. We stared at the paper in silence. She forged this, Kai said, or pressured someone to push it through. Can we prove that? I asked. Not yet, Mira said, but it's enough for suspicion. Outside, a car door slammed. A dog barked down the street. And I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't fighting alone. I was being witnessed. And Vanessa Carter, polished, powerful, perfectly poised, had just underestimated an old man with a notebook, 2 grandkids, and a dead woman's name carved into cedar. She thought the garden was the first cut. She didn't realize it was hers. Vanessa Carter always looked like she belonged behind glass, flawless, untouchable, too perfect to be real. The kind of person you see in a brochure for a corporate wellness retreat. Smooth voice, tidy language, no visible cracks, until you look closer. We didn't start with gossip. That wasn't Joy's way, and I try to honor her in the parts of me that haven't gone cold. We started with documents. Mira sat cross-legged on the living room floor with her laptop open, and HOA files spread like tarot cards around her. Kai leaned over the armrest of the couch, scrolling on his phone like his thumbs were trying to spark fire. She's got 2 properties in the district, Mira said, clicking. That much is public record. Her main residence and a secondary family investment home. But here's the thing. She listed both as primary in different filings. She can't do that, I said. She shouldn't, Mira corrected, unless she's living in 2 places at once, which is pretty hard to do, even for someone as photogenic as Vanessa. Kai flipped his phone toward us. And guess what I found? Her second place? It's on Airbnb, under a different name. But the same photos, same art on the walls, same front porch, same cactus by the entry. I leaned forward. She's short-term leasing? Yup. Which is a direct violation of Section 4C of the HOA Charter. No rentals under 30 days unless specifically approved by the board. She is the board, I said. Mira smiled grimly. Exactly. The next hour felt like something between detective work and archaeology. We dug through old emails, archived minutes from HOA meetings, city filings, and even screenshots of her social media posts. Vanessa liked to present herself as the polished face of order, but beneath the glass, cracks, little ones, enough to start a fracture. She deleted a Facebook post 3 months ago, Kai said, where she mentioned remodeling the guest bathroom in her rental unit. But the HOA filings list that house as her residence. That's fraud, Mira said flatly. If she used that address to secure her presidency, then she's not even eligible to serve. My hands folded tightly in my lap. I'd spent years thinking I'd become invisible to this new version of the neighborhood. Quiet man, retired, keeps his hedges neat and his voice down. But the thing about being overlooked is, it lets you see everything. And what I saw now was someone who believed rules applied to everyone else. I don't want to burn her down, I said. I want her to feel the ground shift. Slow. Kai tilted his head. You want to wait? No, I said. I want to aim. The next morning, I watched her from the porch. She was walking her dog, a white, overbred thing that looked like it cost more than my first truck. Her pace was fast, clipped, head high, but I could tell. She'd read the article. She didn't look at me, but she didn't not look either. It was the kind of glance you throw at a problem you thought you buried, only to find it sitting up straight and watching you. That night, I called Jim, the garlic-breathed accountant board member, and invited him for coffee. He arrived with a cautious smile and a stack of papers under one arm. I probably shouldn't be here, he said. Then you probably shouldn't sit, I replied. He did anyway. I showed him the documents, every filing, every copy, every inconsistency. I let him hold them, read them, underline them. To his credit, he didn't flinch. She's exposed, he said quietly. She's unchecked, I corrected. He nodded. If this goes public, the board will have to call a vote. Not yet, I said. Let her feel the door closing behind her first. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple. We weren't going to confront her. Not yet. We were going to reveal her, piece by piece. Not with shouting, but with mirrors. Let her face herself in public. Let the neighborhood see what lay beneath the uniformity. Because the garden wasn't the only thing she underestimated. She underestimated the power of memory. The next step came from Mira. She designed a simple graphic, a rose with roots shaped like paragraphs. She titled it, What We Build Matters. Underneath, the words, A garden is more than soil. It's story. Let's not erase what grows memory. We printed 10 copies, put one on every porch we trusted. By the following afternoon, people were talking, not loud, not in protest, but in quiet glances, in the slow nods. In the extra seconds someone held the door for me at the market. The roses were gone, but their roots, they'd begun to grow again, underground. It started with a table, just a plain folding one, scratched, uneven, the kind that usually held lemonade at garage sales or discount cookies outside a supermarket. Mira wiped it down with lemon oil, muttering about presentation. Kai taped a hand-painted sign to the front. Memory night. Bring one if you have one. No flyers, no emails, no calls. Just word of mouth, careful and deliberate. One neighbor at a time. We didn't call it a protest. We didn't call it anything. That was the point. On the night of the vigil, I wore my cleanest flannel and placed Joy's photograph at the center of the table. It was the one I kept beside the bed, the one from our 30th anniversary. Her face half lit by candlelight, the faintest trace of red wine at the corner of her smile. We placed a few white roses in a mason jar beside her, petals already starting to soften at the edges. I sat in a lawn chair behind the table, didn't say much, just nodded as people arrived. The first was Mrs. Walsh, who lost her husband 5 years ago and still mows her lawn in slacks. She brought a Polaroid of their old dog, held together with yellowing tape. Then came Hector, the plumber from the next street over. He placed a tiny, weathered baseball on the table. "My kid's first home run," he said quietly. "The ball landed right in your roses." He laughed just once, then stepped back into the shadows. One by one, they came. Someone brought a photo of a treehouse, long torn down. Another brought a crumpled drawing a child once left in a mailbox by mistake. One man, who I'd only ever seen nod from a distance, brought nothing at all, just stood there for a full 5 minutes, looking at the photo of joy. No speeches, no music, no chants, just presence. Mira lit candles, not tall, elegant ones, small, stubby ones, the kind you find in drawers during a blackout. Each flame added a thread of warmth to the air, as if memory itself had a scent. Kai passed out blank index cards. He didn't say what they were for. People seemed to know. Some wrote quietly, heads bowed. Others stared at the empty cards, then folded them in half and tucked them under the jar. No names, just words. At 7:43 p.m., Vanessa arrived. Her heels clicked down the sidewalk like punctuation. Her hair was perfect. Her expression, unreadable. She stopped 5 feet from the table, arms crossed, mouth tight. "This wasn't authorized," she said. I looked up slowly. Memories don't need permission. This isn't an approved HOA event. We didn't invite the HOA. Her gaze swept the scene, candles flickering in mason jars, photos arranged like altars, neighbors speaking in hushes instead of slogans. "This is a violation," she said. I stood, gently, not aggressively, just enough to meet her eye. "No," I said. "This is a reminder." She didn't respond. She just stood there, clearly torn between shouting and maintaining control. That's the trap of people like Vanessa. They can't confront you without becoming the villain. And they can't leave without admitting they lost the room. She chose silence, turned, walked away. But I noticed something strange in her face as she left. Not anger, not even disgust. Something closer to fear. Fear of not being able to control the story. At 8:12, someone brought a lantern. At 8:19, a small girl placed a stuffed bear on the table. "I lost him for a week when I was 5, she said, looking up at me. "You found him under your porch." I remembered. Joy had spotted it first. The night wore on, quietly, peacefully. No one raised their voice. No one made demands. But when the candles flickered against faces that used to pass each other without pause, you could feel something changing. It wasn't just about my garden anymore. It was about everyone's. All the little pieces that had been erased, one committee vote at a time. A bird feeder taken down. A tree trimmed too short. A front bench removed for being too personal. What we lost wasn't landscaping. It was texture. It was soul. And tonight, we'd laid it bare, without rage, without resistance, just remembrance. Before people began to leave, Mira added a second sign beside the table. It said, "Memory is not a violation. It's a root, and roots run deep." The morning after the vigil, the roses were still gone, but something had taken root. It wasn't just in the dirt. It was in people. Neighbors walked slower past my house. Some paused. A few lingered, looking at the sign Mira left behind. Others nodded, quiet but deliberate, like a vow. At 8:03 a.m., Kai tapped his phone screen and smiled. Time to hold up the mirror. He posted the photo. It wasn't mine. It was Vanessa's. A cropped screenshot from a rental platform. The name on the listing wasn't hers, but the photos didn't lie. The living room art matched the ones in her HOA profile. The couch, the kitchen backsplash, the cactus in the window. Above the image, Kai wrote, HOA president lists her primary residence as a vacation rental, violates the same bylaws she enforces. Below it, we added a scanned excerpt from the HOA code, neatly highlighted. Any board member must maintain their primary and legal residence within the neighborhood for the duration of their term. Short-term rentals, less than 30 days, within HOA limits, are prohibited unless approved by a majority board vote and public notice is given. The post went up in the neighborhood Facebook group first, then on Nextdoor. By noon, it had been shared over 200 times. Mira printed a physical copy and pinned it to the HOA community board by the mailbox station. She used a pushpin shaped like a flower. "Ironic," she said. "That's probably a violation too." By 3 p.m., someone, probably Vanessa, had torn it down, but the damage was done. The inbox started flooding. First trickles, then a wave. Jim, our board member friend, called me again. "She's panicking," he said. "Tried to get the board to issue a statement calling it a smear." "Is it untrue?" I asked. He sighed. "No, but she says the community's misinterpreting things. Maybe they're just finally seeing them." That night, we got an email from a local reporter. She'd read the original article about the garden and followed the posts online. "Would love to speak with you, Mr. Dawson," she wrote. "Your story seems to be echoing more than you think." I showed the message to Mira. She looked up. "Do you want to go public?" I thought about it. The camera, the interviews, the vulnerability. Then I thought about Joy, how she used to tell me, "If you never speak, don't be surprised when people write your story for you." I nodded. "Yes, but on my terms." We met the reporter at a nearby coffee shop. Her name was Andrea. Young, but not in a way that made her careless. She asked questions the way a good gardener does, gently, with patience. I told her about Joy, about the roses, about the plaque, about the silence that followed the removal, and how something started growing in the quiet. I didn't talk about Vanessa much. I didn't need to. Truth speaks louder without shouting. By the time we returned home, the article was already live. The garden that was taken, one man's memory versus the HOA machine. She quoted my line about Joy's garden, how memory has roots, how what we grow says more about us than what we cut down. She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. The comments section filled in the blanks. By morning, the HOA Facebook page was a war zone. People began sharing their own stories. Trees cut down without notice, swing sets deemed unsightly, fences repainted by force. A woman posted a photo of her child's chalk drawings being hosed off by HOA landscapers. "We were told it violated color standards," she wrote. Another man added a screenshot. Vanessa, caught on security cam, yelling at an elderly couple about unauthorized planters. Each post added weight. Each story, another mirror. And then came the video. It wasn't ours. We don't know who recorded it. But someone had been filming the night of the vigil, from a distance, under low light. The video showed Vanessa stepping into the candlelit space. It captured her words. "This isn't authorized." And then me, standing slow, deliberate. Memories don't need permission. That was all it took. The video spread. It hit a local subreddit, then Reddit's r/ho-hell. Then someone on Twitter reposted it with the caption, "This man buried his wife, planted roses in her memory, and his HOA president bulldozed them. But he didn't scream. He remembered." 12,000 likes in one day. The comments told the rest. She messed with the wrong grandpa. Absolute legend move. I want to grow old like him. And beneath it all, Vanessa needs to go. At the next HOA board meeting, the room was full. People who hadn't attended in years showed up, folding chairs pulled from the back, standing room only. Vanessa walked in, jaw tight, flanked by two board members who looked like they regretted it. She stood behind the podium, cleared her throat, and began reading from a pre-written statement about misinformation, context, and neighborhood cohesion. She never looked at me, but every word bounced off a wall that had already cracked. And when the crowd didn't clap, when they didn't even blink, she faltered. For the first time, Vanessa Carter didn't look polished. She looked small, because the worst kind of mirror is the kind you can't look away from. And we had just held one up to her face. The letter from the IRS came folded in thirds and sealed with a barcode. No drama, no warning, just plain white paper and quiet consequences. It arrived the same week a county inspector parked his truck in front of Vanessa's second property for 2 hours, clipboard in hand, camera around his neck. Kai watched from our front window like it was a baseball game. "They're checking for structural violations," he said. "You know she never pulled permits for that patio addition." Mira raised an eyebrow. "You think this is from the Facebook post?" "I think the post lit the match," he replied. But Vanessa stacked the kindling herself. The journalist, Andrea, called 2 days later. Said her article had been picked up by the city's main paper. "They want to run a weekend feature," she told me. "Full spread, human interest. You're the heart of it." "I'm not the story," I said. "Joy is." "Then we'll tell it right." I agreed to meet the photographer that Thursday. Mira helped me pick out a shirt Joy used to like, navy blue with tiny white dots, soft at the collar from age. Kai brushed the dust off the plaque pieces and arranged them on the table like evidence in a courtroom. The photos were simple. Me on the porch, me standing by the dirt patch, one with Joy's picture and the jar of white roses. The photographer, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, said softly, "I lost my dad last year. He planted tulips. Every spring I wait for them. It's like he shows up." I nodded. The flowers remember, even when people forget. That quote made the final article. The next day, the calls started. Not just neighbors. People from nearby communities, retirement homes, a teacher who wanted to show the article to her civics class. They didn't talk about bylaws or permits. They talked about memory, about loss, about the quiet ways we try to keep love living. The more they called, the quieter Vanessa got. The HOA board scheduled an emergency session. Not public, not recorded, but word leaked anyway. She tried to blame everything on a contractor, Jim told me afterward. Said she delegated too much, that she never intended the garden removal to go forward. She signed it. She claimed she never saw it. Did anyone believe her? Jim rubbed the back of his neck. Not even her allies. At that meeting, a board member, Susan, who once voted against flower boxes, formally motioned to open an internal review into Vanessa's residency status and permit violations. The motion passed, unanimously. Vanessa left the meeting early. The next morning, her car didn't move from the driveway. By evening, the porch lights were off, her blinds drawn. Kai walked up to me around sunset. "She's losing grip," he said. "No," I said. "She lost it, the moment she forgot who the neighborhood belonged to." He nodded, quiet. "You still angry?" "Anger burns fast. I prefer the long fire." That night, I got another email from the HOA. It was short, cold, legal. "The board has initiated a formal review of President Carter's conduct. Community members may submit documented concerns. An anonymous vote on leadership will follow, pending findings." Below it, a submission form. Upload section. Optional comment box. Mira read over my shoulder. "You going to send something?" "I already have," I said, pointing at the dirt outside. It just took them a while to read it. That week, more stories surfaced. An elderly veteran had been fined for placing a small flag planter on his balcony. A mother of two was issued a citation for children's toys left in view. A couple lost their garden gnomes, stolen, they said, by HOA landscaping crews without notice. Each story, another thread, and all of them tied to Vanessa. When the vote opened, it spread like fire. Mira made a new graphic. No accusations, just a photo of my garden, pre-removal. Joy's plaque in the corner. The caption, "This isn't about flowers. It's about who we let make the rules. Vote your memory." By the weekend, over 70% of eligible members had voted. No signs, no protests, just action. Vanessa didn't show her face. Not on the street, not at meetings, not online. But the final blow came from a place she never saw coming. The city council. Turns out, one of the people who'd read my story was Councilwoman Reyes, a former teacher, now running for mayor. She contacted the HOA directly. Her email was leaked. "I suggest your leadership review compliance with city regulations promptly. Community governance must reflect community values. I'll be watching this process closely." And that made the board fold like wet cardboard. Vanessa was done. Not officially yet. But everyone felt it. The silence around her house wasn't privacy anymore. It was collapse. The kind no apology can fix. And the dirt outside my house? It didn't look like a wound anymore. It looked like soil again. The removal letter was pinned to the bulletin board beside the HOA pool. Typed, centered, official. Effective immediately, Vanessa Carter is removed from her position as HOA president due to verified violations of the governing charter, failure to disclose rental activity, and conduct unbecoming of board leadership. No signature, no apology, just a sentence, like a gavel falling. I walked to the board and stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't believe it, but because belief is one thing, and witnessing is another. It had finally happened. The neighbors didn't cheer. There was no parade. But people lingered at that bulletin board longer than usual. They read slowly, twice. Some turned to me and nodded. Some patted my shoulder. One woman, Jeanette, I think, who once glared at Joy for hanging wind chimes, actually whispered, "I'm sorry." That was all I needed. Vanessa didn't come outside the day the vote results were posted, but 2 days later, her front yard filled with strangers, movers. Boxes were carried out like pieces of a broken castle, rolled up rugs, velvet dining chairs, a full-length mirror wrapped in a padded blanket. Kai watched through the window. "Think she's moving into that rental she lied about?" "She'll move somewhere," I said. "But it won't be far enough." Mira looked up from her laptop. Short-term rental license revoked. City found inconsistencies in her tax filings. She's being fined. "Justice?" Kai asked. "No," I said. "Just gravity." We watched as her Audi was loaded onto a trailer. Then the movers returned for the dog crate. Empty. Apparently, even her designer mutt had somewhere better to be. By dusk, the house was quiet. Blinds shut. For sale sign posted. She was gone. I stepped onto my porch and stared across the street. For a long time, I didn't think I'd see the day. And yet, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like oxygen. The next morning, a knock at my door. I opened it to find Linda Gibbons, the soft-spoken woman who lived in the brown house with the ceramic frog collection. She was holding a clipboard and a manila envelope. "Mr. Dawson," she said, a little nervous, "the board elected me interim president. I'm not great with speeches, but I read your article, and I came to ask." She handed me the envelope. Inside was a single question, handwritten. Would you like to replant your roses? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked past her and down the steps, barefoot. I stood in the dirt, let the warmth seep into my soles. No, I said. Her face fell a little. I'd like to plant more than roses. She blinked. More? A garden, I said. For the community. Not just flowers. A place to sit, to remember. She smiled slowly, a little stunned. You'd do that? I've already started, I said, holding up the notebook. It began with roots. Now it needs hands. Linda nodded. You'll have them. Within a week, volunteers started showing up. Not in crowds. Not with shovels and banners. Just one by one. Gail from across the street brought mulch. Hector brought wood for a bench. The kids who used to speed past on bikes came to dig. Mira painted signs. Kai mapped the layout. I supervised and pointed and poured lemonade. And we planted. Not just roses, though those came too. We planted wildflowers, low shrubs, a few late-season tulips, even a stubborn vine that Joy used to joke had a mind of its own. One man donated a small dogwood tree. A woman brought a stepping stone engraved with a single word. Remember. On the final day of planting, the sun was high and stubborn. Kai wiped his brow and flopped onto the grass. You think she'd like it? He asked, motioning to the garden. I didn't have to ask who he meant. I looked at the bench beneath the dogwood, at the way the petals from the new rose bushes curled slightly in the wind. She hated fuss, I said. Mira grinned, but she loved flowers. I sat beside her and exhaled, slow, deep. The garden wasn't symmetrical. It didn't match the color schemes on the HOA brochure. There were no turf squares, no artificial borders. It was messy, alive, rooted. People started calling it Joy's Garden again, and this time, no one tore down the sign. The soil was soft again. That was the first thing I noticed, walking through the garden barefoot as the first true spring rain came and went like a blessing. You can tell when ground is ready. It gives a little. Breaths in, holds you gently instead of resisting. This land had seen hurt, but now it held memory like it was cradling it. The new sign went up 2 weeks after Vanessa moved out. Kai painted the lettering. Mira carved the border. It read, Joy's Garden, for those we remember. The plaque wasn't just mine anymore. It didn't stand in a patch of dirt on its own. It stood at the center of a gathering place, flowers in a dozen different colors, names written in chalk on small stones, a bench built from reclaimed wood and quiet patience. People came, not in crowds, not all at once, but enough. The old man who lost his wife during COVID brought a folding chair and sat for an hour in silence, nodding when I passed. A boy with his father traced the petals of a tulip with one small finger. A woman with a service dog knelt beside the bench and left behind a photo of her brother. No rules, no time limits, just memory. Kai said it best, one evening when the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the wind picked up in that way that rustles leaves like voices. This place doesn't make people feel guilty, he said. It makes them feel seen. Mira agreed. It's a living thing now. She was right. The garden had stopped being mine the moment I invited others into it. But Joy would have loved that. She used to say, what's the point of beauty if no one sees it? She was never flashy, never loud, but she believed in small, deliberate kindness, planting flowers, leaving notes, listening fully. That's what the garden had become, an extension of her. A few days after the new sign went up, Linda, now officially confirmed as HOA president, called a community meeting. It wasn't in the sterile rec room. It was on the grass, by the garden. She sat on the bench I helped build, clipboard in her lap, legs tucked modestly beneath her skirt. "We're proposing some bylaw changes," she said, "ones that reflect what this place has become. Less regulation on personal landscaping, more support for memorials, for gathering spaces, fewer fines, more trust." The neighbors clapped. Some cried. When she finished, she turned to me and asked quietly, "Would you like to say something?" I stood, slowly, the way old bones demand. "Thank you," I said simply, but I already said what needed saying. I gestured toward the garden. "This is the speech." Later, Mira found me sitting alone on the bench. "You miss her?" she asked. I smiled. "Every day." "Does this help?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my notebook, still the same one I started the day they tore the roses out, and added one last entry. "What we grew, Silver Joy, 1999-2023, now replanted beside the dogwood. Gold Drop, given to a neighbor who lost her sister. Sunflare, thriving in the new plot near the sidewalk. Climbing Eden, wrapping slowly, stubbornly around the new trellis. Unnamed White, bloomed again. No one planted it. It just returned." I looked at Mira. "It doesn't bring her back," I said, "but it keeps her here." She nodded, eyes glassy. "You think she'd approve?" she asked. I laughed softly. She'd call it too much fuss. Then she'd bring lemonade. That night, the three of us, Mira, Kai, and I, sat on the porch watching the garden glow under the amber porch light. Someone had left wind chimes in the branches of the dogwood. They clinked gently in the breeze. Kai looked up at the stars. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "now we take care of it." "Forever?" "No, just long enough for someone else to fall in love with it. Because that's the thing about legacy. It doesn't shout. It doesn't carve itself in stone. It grows, slowly, quietly, like roots beneath the surface, waiting to rise, like roses after winter."